So yeah, thank you everyone for being here today, and also thank you Olivia for organizing this event. So today, mainly, as Olivia mentioned, I will talk about my PhD thesis, and also I briefly explain what I do here. But before that, I'd like to introduce myself by giving my research path. So I hold a bachelor's degree in agriculture mechanization engineering, or also known as bioresource engineering. Then continuing my studies in the same field, I began my research journey by focusing on life cycle assessment and energy optimization in forestry and harvestable products. Then, having LCA background in agriculture engineering, I joined Rice Research Institute of Iran and conducted LCA and techno-economic analysis of different cropping systems. Knowing techno-economic analysis and LCA, I began my PhD at ETS, which my thesis was more about energy transition, net zero emission technology, net zero emission strategies, and carbon dioxide removal technology, which I explained further today. And in the meantime, I had the opportunity to work as a scenario modeler at Canada Energy Baron to enrich my knowledge of energy system modeling for industrial processes and also hydrogen pathways. Then being in the construction department at OTS and having LCA background, I contribute in the project of dynamic life cycle assessment of different building elements in New Zealand. And anyway, I started my postdoc after graduation from ETS, and which my work mainly focused on energy system modeling and integrated assessment model. So more than 130 countries, including Canada, have now set the net zero emission target by mid-century. To achieve that, we need large-scale deployment of carbon dioxide removal, or also known as negative emission technologies. 4 of these technologies, namely reforestation, change in forest management, and uptake and storage by agricultural soils, all under terrestrial carbon removal and sequestration, are ready for large-scale deployment. And also bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration, BECCS. You see their capacity curve in front of each other. Also, direct air capture, DAC, is another option, but its cost is prohibitively high right now. In addition, lots of countries, they're including showing interest in hydrogen to help them to get to net zero emission targets. So just to give you an idea of our current climate impact, where we are right now, in 2020, our total net GHG emission was about 55 gigaton CO2 equivalent. And to achieve Paris goals, for example, in the scenario of 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to reduce our gross emission by 27 gigaton CO2, and we need land-based CDR, terrestrial carbon sequestration, and also novel CDR like direct air capture, BECCS, to achieve this goal to be around 24 gigaton CO2 in 2035. And we need further reduction by 2050 to achieve this goal. So the major limitation of CDR to in-forest carbon storage is the demand for wood, because the demand for wood doesn't let us to reduce the harvest rate. And land requirement, Also, inability to fully implement forest management strategy and practices. Of course, there are disturbances that may also reduce the amount of carbon stored in the forest. Disturbances like wildfire, like spruce spotboard in Quebec. Bioenergy with carbon capture and storage BECCS. So a plant during their lifetime, they capture and sequester CO2. We can harvest the biomass and convert it to bioenergy and capture on-site CO2 to CCS, then store it further down the road. And that amount of carbon will be seen as negative emission in the GHG calculation. That's how BECCS become negative emission technologies. But deployment of BECCS must incorporate numerous strategies in which forest and forest-based forest-related sector contribute to CDR because they're going to be a trade-off between carbon sequestration, storage, and plant product, biomass production. And there are other limitations like land requirements. Sorry. Hydrogen produced through reforming natural gas is called gray hydrogen. If you add a CCS, carbon capture, to this, you reduce the emission, and they call it blue hydrogen. Green hydrogen is produced through using electrolyzer by using renewable electricity. Gasification of biomass also could be seen as green hydrogen. It can, if you add CCS, it can produce a negative emission also. So, but global hydrogen production in 2021 was 94 million tons, which only 1% of it was through green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, which using CCS on natural gas-based or fossil fuel-based hydrogen. Bottom-up energy system model like TIMES are suitable for emerging technologies like biofuels. The main output of this model is energy system configuration, which is a linear programming model. Main output like capacity, cost, and prices, energy flows from primary energy to final energy consumption, and so on. And in this study, we use North American times model. And for our study, we kind of extracted Latin Quebec, which is a region of the North American times model, and it includes from primary energy to final energy and useful energy and different technologies. It includes 4,000 technologies, 800 commodity, and 700 user constraint. But it has limited at the time lignocellulosic biomass and biofuels conversion processes. Also, there is a lack of representation of terrestrial carbon sequestration and removal, such as forest management strategies. And it also disregards biogenic CO2 flows. But what are biogenic CO2 flows? Carbon that is taken up, sequestered, and or released by biomass is known as biogenic CO2. So we can assume that biogenic carbon is neutral since the amount of biogenic CO2 released because of combustion of biomass is equal to the amount of CO2 or carbon that plant sequesters itself during its growth. This could be, we can assume that is correct for short rotation crops like annual crops, like corn or whatever. But this may not stay true for longer rotation plants, such as the case for trees, since it takes more than 100 years to for a plant for this carbon emitted from combustion of biomass to be returned to the biosphere from the atmosphere. So many studies they're challenging this assumption, which the carbon neutrality assumption is increasingly being questioned, with several studies indicating that it may result in accounting error and bias decision making. Many studies use modeling framework that simulate the dynamic of forest carbon stocks, but they cannot introduce the most cost-effective way. And many studies use energy system model like TIMES to assess the role of bioenergy while including market competition between different pathways, although they follow a carbon neutrality assumption. So we are going to address three main questions in this study. What is the contribution of forest-based bioenergy in achieving deep decarbonization in Quebec for the carbon neutrality assumption? And does the assumption of biogenic carbon neutrality affect the decarbonization pathway? And what is the role of biomass-based hydrogen in Quebec energy transition compared to other emerging hydrogen technologies? So our first study. You see the reference energy system of emerging and existing bioenergy technologies that we collected all the technical data from the literature and modeled in our energy system. These technologies are mainly biochemical conversion processes such as fermentation, or techno-chemical conversion processes such as gasification, pyrolysis, and so on. And some our bioenergies are like pyrolysis oil, biobutanol, syngas, hydrogen, and different sort of bioenergies. And instead of a generic feedstock for the model, we introduced different type of feedstock and stuff like curve with different availability potential and their relative costs for each of these feedstock. And we included 4 different scenarios for this study. A business as usual scenario, which only include existing governmental policies, a business as usual scenario plus those forest-based bioenergy technologies, and 2 GHG reduction scenario, one with 70% reduction in 2050 and one 80%. So we model all the scenario plus those primary and secondary forest-based bioenergy technologies in our energy system. Veda software management, then read all these data and assumption, then input it to Times code. Times code runs in GAMS, then leading to a program with more than 300,000 variables, and a solver such as Cplex will be used to optimize this. Then Veda reads the result and provides output for us. These are some sample results which show total GHG emission in Quebec. We see a drop here. It's because of the existing governmental policies, but most of the emission in the sector is because of the transportation, more than 50%, and except for our stringent GHG emission, GHG being 2050, which industrial sector is the main contributor to GHG. And this shows the challenge of decarbonizing industrial sector. Here you see the final energy consumption in Quebec. In 2011 was dominated by fossil fuels, but as we introduce our GHG constraint, this shift to usage of electricity, showing the need for electrification, especially for GHG and GHG in 2050, which increased to 60% and 70%. And here you also see the consumption of bioenergy by type in Quebec. So bioenergy consumption increases over time by adding a GHG constraint. Also in 2050, our stringent GHG shows a less amount of bioenergy consumption. It's because the model gives the priority to I don't know, some bioethanol and also FT diesel instead of using biosolids. So to meet the demand for reducing the emission of the transportation sector. So that's why instead of using it strictly as a biosolid, it converted to bioethanol, then and you will lose some of it.
These are the results.
These are the results of
your work right now.
Yeah.
So why there's some pages results? What was it?
It's the result of this study.
For example, this graphic belongs to this one.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. As you see before, this one. So where the confusion is. Yeah. So the main insight in this study was the Quebec government envisioned 50% increase in bioenergy production by 2030. But this study found out that it could increase the bioenergy production in GHG by 75% and 114% for GHG in 2030. But all these results by assuming a carbon neutrality for the biomass consumption. So in our second study, as I mentioned, several studies indicating that treating biogenic CO2 as carbon neutral may result in accounting error and biased decision making. So, but does this assumption affect the decarbonization pathway or not? We're going to find out. So we use the combined method for this to solve this issue. We model different forest management strategies in CBM CFS3, which is a biogenic carbon model, which result in different biomass availabilities and forest unit emission. Having these, we input these to our energy system model, hoping to this would lead to an unbiased decision making and introduce our decarbonization pathway. So for forest management strategies, we used the result of an ongoing, at the time, thesis, PhD thesis. We chose 3 different forest management strategies, a business as usual scenario, and a residue scenario that represent intensification strategies and deliver the maximum feedstock and therefore the lowest carbon sequestration. And also we chose a less harvest strategy from 3, which represent a conservation strategy and produce less biomass, but higher carbon sequestration in the forest. And this is how I model each forest management strategies in our energy system. Each forest management can produce roundwood, western residues, and GHG. GHGs are forest emission and sequestration, extraction, transportation emission, and also decay emission. The harvesting residue can be transferred to bioenergy production. Roundwood could be transferred to other industries, forest industries. Then you will have more residues. That residue can go to upper, lower industries or bioenergy production. Forest management tool, which was a residue, which would also lead to highest residue, could also produce low quality roundwood, 50% to roundwood, also 50% could go to bioenergy production. And this is the reference energy system of all our bioenergy and BECCS technologies. For bioenergy technology, we use the same technologies. And for BECCS, bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration, we cook post-combustion CCS with those bioenergy technology by recalculating their efficiency and adding extra investment costs, operating and fixed variable costs, and etc. We also added a few technologies that use pre-combustion CCS as well. And these are our scenarios. We have a reference case scenario which doesn't include bioenergy strategy, forest management strategy, or biogenic CO2, nor net zero emission by 2050. GHGCN, same as reference case, but include net zero emission by 2050. And accordingly, we added this forest management, each of the forest management, including or excluding biogenic CO2, and made different scenarios, which we see a few results here. So taking forest sequestration into account increases the model ability to decarbonize the system. For example, in 2040, REF FM1 showed lower CO2 equivalent emission than its carbon neutral counterpart, REF FMC. So this shouldn't be seen as postponing the decarbonization, but it should be seen as an opportunity to flatten the GHG trajectories. In 2040, REF-FM2 shows higher emission than REF-FM2-CN, which is a carbon neutral, this one. And this is because the available forest sequestration in this forest management cannot offset the biogenic CO2 emission from this scenario. And this happens later for FM1 and FM3 because they have more sequestration in these scenarios. For example, in FM3, it shows in 2050 a sequestration is 65. I mean, the net emission is 65 megatons CO2 equivalent, which I think it should we recommend choosing a sustainable forest management strategy with high sequestration capability, provides an opportunity to alleviate the decarbonization effort. So, after 2030, GHG scenarios assuming biogenic carbon neutrality rely on BECCS. For example, GHGCN, you see the negative amount here. It's because of using BECCS. When you use BECCS, then you can capture the CO2 in the biomass, then sequester it in saline aquifer. Then you calculate that amount as negative emission in your GHG emissions. That's how this scenario works. And to achieve net zero emission in 2050, the need for DAC, direct air capture, is inevitable and depend on available forest sequestration. For example, GHGFM2CM, which is a carbon neutral scenario, it shows the need for DAC, direct air capture, is 1 megaton CO2 equivalent. This doesn't mean that forest management tool leads to best results, because when we included biogenic CO2 in the model in this scenario, the need for DAC increased to 18 megaton CO2. So that's why we say the carbon neutrality assumption leads to a biased decision making. And also, when we include, you see the bioenergy consumption in all the scenarios here. When we include biogenic CO2 in our scenarios in 2050, you see here, it decreased the amount of bioenergy consumption by 25%. And so this would result in biased decision making. And also, not including biogenic CO2, it makes the model to choose alternative BECCS, another source of biased decision making. So it's important to first establish your forest management before investing on BECCS. So the main insight was the carbon neutrality assumption leads to biased decision making. Also, we may not be able to deploy in a large scale these novel CDR like direct air capture or whatnot, BECCS. But we can shift to forest management strategy that carry a lower cost than other nets. That would be useful. So now we are gonna continue and talk about hydrogen in our latest work. So as I mentioned before, many countries, they have adopted a hydrogen strategy. They're investing in hydrogen, green and blue hydrogen, in their net zero emission targets. But there is a significant disagreement between modeling-based studies about the extent to which hydrogen is necessary or useful to fully decarbonize at the lowest possible cost, and about the relevance of negative emission provided by BECCS. So we use the developed integrated approach, the combined approach that we did in the previous study, our energy system model, plus the biogenic, that CBM CFS3 model, to conduct a comprehensive regionalized techno-economic study focused on different hydrogen pathways in Quebec. We include GHG emission and uptake associated with forest management, BECCS, and also biogenic CO2 flows. Our energy system already included the different hydrogen pathways, SMR, ATR, gasification, different sort of also distribution network, storage technology, and whatnot. We also included gasification with pre-combustion and post-combustion CCS to the model. We consider a few scenarios, which you can see 5 of them here, or 6 of them here. A reference case with existing governmental policies, a net zero emission by 2050, and a net zero emission by 2050, but we force the model to use at least 25% and by in 2025 and 70% in 2050 of hydrogen-based steam in the industrial sector. Because we, as I mentioned before, decarbonizing industrial sector it was challenging, so we want to focus on that as well. We also considered another scenario, net zero 2050 CCU, by expanding industrial CCU. CCU is carbon capture and usage. I explain in the next slide. And a net zero 2040 by accelerating net zero target, and also net zero 2060 by postponing our net zero target to see the result. So you see the reference energy system of carbon capture and usage and sequestration in our model. Here you see the different sectors that can produce, that can release or emit CO2 to the atmosphere. Here, this CO2 could be left in the atmosphere, which or could be captured by our foresting, which we included in the previous work, or it could be captured by direct capture. We also have, for some sector, we have CCS, carbon capture and storage, that can capture the CO2, and this capture CO2 plus the capture CO2 from direct capture will be transferred to some sites and sequestered in deep some aquifer, or I don't know, depleted oil wells. Or this captured CO2 could be converted to synthetic fuels using hydrogen. So we wanted to use our precious hydrogen as a feedstock instead of using our hydrogen in a boiler to generate heat. So that's why we included the NZ 2050 CCU, expanding CCU policy, to use our hydrogen as a source of feedstock to produce synthetic fuels like jet fuel, like synthetic methane and whatnot, instead of using it as a source of steam or heat. You see hydrogen production and hydrogen consumption here. Before 2040, all the generated hydrogen, most of it will be exported. But as the demand increases in 2040 for the industrial and transportation sector, we see that hydrogen production increases as well, mainly through reforming natural gas using CCS, blue hydrogen. For our accelerated net zero goal, NZ 2040, you see that model is using biomass-based hydrogen plus CCS, which can produce a negative emission there, since the model needs this negative emission to get to this stringent GHG goal. As we go on the time horizon, in 2050 and 2060, the need for hydrogen increases, reaching to 174 petajoule in 2060 for NZ 2050 CCU scenario, indicating the importance of hydrogen in decarbonizing the energy system. And most of the hydrogen is used in the industrial sector and also as a feedstock in the CCU scenario. In 2050, the penetration of hydrogen in industrial sector was 27%. The need for DAC, 7.9 megaton CO2 equivalent direct capture, and the industrial GHGs in 2050 was 5 megatons. Forcing our model to use more hydrogen in the industrial sector by 70%, lowered the need for DAC by 5.5 megaton CO2 equivalent, and also lowered industrial GHGs in 2050. Expanding CCU in our model increased the penetration of hydrogen industrial sector by 71%, slightly decreased the need for DAC, direct capture, but it slightly increased the industrial GHG because it used that industrial GHG to produce those synthetic fuel. Also, it decreased over the time horizon after 2050, before 2060. So it kind of postponed the decarbonizing industrial sector. So as a main insight of this study, regardless of the chosen strategy, hydrogen is required for getting to net zero emission target. Hydrogen provides a key trade-off between reliance on exterior air capture, reliance on carbon storage, reliance on wind and solar build-out, and the intersectoral allocation of residual emission, and the overall cost of achieving emission targets. What are our recommendations? We recommend considering potential limitation and trade-off associated with fire space bioenergy, for example, through including non-energetic forest products in the model. Import prices in the energy system that we use as the model do not adequately consider the costs associated with the GHG mitigation. This could result in burden shifting. We recommend incorporating other land use change strategies like wetland settlements and whatnot as potential CDR method into the energy system model. We recommend adopting a life cycle approach to consider other environmental impact, also short-lived environmental forces like black carbon environments. We did not consider decomposition emission of harvested wood product. We assumed a circular economy. When you leave them in the landfill, so that harvested wood product would decompose and release emission. We assume that this harvested wood product comes to the system, we burn as a bioenergy, or we use somehow in a circular way. For doing that, we need a harvested wood product model to put the fuel in your system. Potential substitution effect resulting from the use of harvested wood product instead of non-wood materials. We didn't include this in our model. And one could examine the raising level of disturbances. For the disturbances like wildfire, spruce budworm, we only use historical data before 2018 because the data was available in that time. But one could explore more in this area. Indirect emission effect on biodiversity and land conservation, competition for water resources, and social equity and acceptance concern should be considered. And for all of these, I think most of these could be addressed using integrated assessment model, which kind of driven me to join GERAD. So at GERAD, one of the reasons I joined GERAD was to delve into integrated assessment model to overcome previous research limitation, and also collaborate on development of GERAD's IM model, AD-Merge. Utilizing my expertise in energy transition and hydrogen to enrich the current project, augment side project, and also conceptualize future research. You all know of merge model. It includes 4 different modules: energy, macroeconomic, climate, and dynamic module. And my work here is mainly developing different hydrogen pathway in merge model, and under hydrogen and climate partnership H2P project, which is a new hydrogen network between Canada and Germany. The main goal of this project is to assess hydrogen's contribution to achieve net zero emission targets and energy security. And we are going to upgrade ADMers to encapsulate diverse hydrogen production pathway, sectoral consumption, and its global trade dynamics. Also executing policies simulation using ADMers for both cost benefit and cost effectiveness analysis. And of course, our focus will be mainly on Canadian context within the global context that we have to evaluate the implication of energy and climate policies on the nation's energy sector and economy. So we started by representing H2 in the merge model, including gas-based, hydrogen, coal-based, and also electrolysis. And in the second phase, or down the road, we will add more hydrogen pathway in the model, like biohydrogen or different sort of production pathways. Then, yeah, thank you, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you.